Morning, everybody. So it starts early, right? We start doing these things really early on. We find what makes us different or what makes us, in our own mind, exceptional or special. And we amplify those things and we find ourselves judging others compared to those things that we see ourselves as great at. Take, for instance, my son's little illustration about dominating everybody in volleyball all by himself. Which is a powerful story, right? I mean, just life-changing. But you have these things that you hold on to, and we find those things, and really to everybody else, they sound, they can sound dumb. So like in my life, early on, I was told by my dad that, you're Beukelman, you're tall, and that's what makes you special, whatever, because you're tall. You know what I did to become tall? I was born. Right? I was born. I didn't choose this. I didn't bring this on, but I found myself as a little kid looking at other people who weren't as tall as me and then saying, well, poor little Betsy, she's tiny compared to me, right? You would carry these things on, and you would hold on to these things as if in some way they made you exceptional, and they gave you the right to then judge other people. It's silly when we look at it with those things, but we do them anyway. And let's be real, for most of us, we have things that we use to convince ourselves that we have value, right? We have things that we use that convince ourselves that we matter, and when other people drive us crazy, we find why it is that those people don't measure up to us. If we're being honest, most of us are super judgy. Right? We live in a super judgy society built around a culture that's super judgy, where we find what makes people different, we look at them and we say, this is why you're a problem. And the fact is, I don't know very many people who don't do this. Maybe you do. Maybe you're one of those people who doesn't look at somebody else and say, you're broken in this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way, and I can see that. I've known a few people that are that way, but the list is a very, very short list. For most of us, it seems like something that we do all the time. And so this gets us to a conversation that we're going to have today, because we're going to cover a verse today that is actually one of the more famous verses in all the Bible. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. And Matthew chapter 7, 1 and 2 says, I'm going to say this the King Jamesy way that we hear it said all the time, judge not, lest ye be judged. For by the measure that you judge others, ye shall be judged as welleth. Right? You hear these things, right? This idea of judging other people is something that we're not supposed to do. And if you do judge other people, you're going to be measured in the same way. And this verse is actually thrown at Christians a lot of times, like, don't judge. You're not supposed to judge us. You're not supposed to do these things. But it gets me to this question, because we're going to have a conversation about this today. If this is such a common thing, almost as common as breathing, if this is something that really for most of us is an issue, why do we have this in us in the first place? Right? Why do we have this tendency within us to find ourselves looking at people and then just assuming the worst? I know that I'm not the only one who has this issue. I know that I'm not the only person in this room who has found himself or herself frustrated with himself or herself because I shouldn't be thinking this thing about these people. You know what I'm talking about? But yet, it's right there, and it drives you crazy. So why do we have this? We get to see that today. We're going to see that in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. And I want to start this with a premise, and I want you to hear this. I want you to think this in your mind, lock this in, and this is more than just for Sunday, just this Sunday. It's more for every day. We were built to live the way that Jesus calls us to live. Okay, we were built to do this, not judge, but we were built to live the way that Jesus calls us to live out life. And so today we're going to see how that works. So we're going to start in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 and 2, and it says this. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. If you will be treated as you treat, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And this, we'll be putting those things up on the screen. This is going to be Matthew chapter 7, starting at verse 1 on page 701. And it says that. So do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. As we start this conversation this morning, I want to talk to you guys about scoreboards. Here's my proposition for you today. Most of us have a scoreboard going in our minds. All right? We have a scoreboard going in our minds with the people that are around us. We see people, And we think this is why I'm winning and you're not. Like I said earlier, I'm tall, which is silly. But you may say to yourself, I got a better SAT score. You may say to yourself, I got the raise. This person didn't get the raise. I am in shape. This person's overweight. I brush my teeth. That person doesn't brush his teeth. Right? We have these things that we carry because we have this tendency to try to win. You know what all of us hate? Well, we hate losing. But I can give you something worse than losing. How many of you guys get super excited? How many of you guys have a participation trophy hanging in your house? Because you want people to know I was there and I showed up. I actually have one of those with me today. This is a participation trophy from a 5K thing that my family did in Oklahoma City, a participation trophy. You want to know how impressive this is? What does it say on it? Nothing. Other than this, I didn't even notice this until I was looking at it this week. What does that say? No, it doesn't. If you look closely, it actually just says finisher. They didn't even take time to spell it right. Right? It's you see it? You see it now, don't you? Right? I didn't even notice that until I looked at this thing this week. I had just thrown it in the side, and I was like, I wonder if I have a participation trophy somewhere. And I found this thing. It's pretty fantastic, right? It really speaks to how we do life. I don't care about participation trophies. I want to know that I won. I want to know that I won and I did this, and I want to know that I accomplished these things, and I want to know why it is that I beat this other person. And Jesus then speaks into this, and he looks at this, and he says, look, we're going to have a conversation today. As he's working through the Sermon on the Mount, as he started talking about how, in Matthew 5, talked a lot about, you've heard that it was said, don't do these things, but I'm telling you, you got to look at your heart. It's beyond just what you're doing. And then in Matthew 6, Jesus spends a lot of time saying, don't do your righteous acts before other people. Don't give money and make sure everybody knows that you give. Don't pray and make sure that you're praying loud, long prayers so everybody knows that you're praying. Don't fast. I talked about that a few weeks ago. Don't fast and be like, oh, I'm so weak because I'm fasting because I'm such a good, godly man. Don't do these things because you're doing them to prove to other people why you're better than them. Because you're trying to win. And then Jesus gets to the heart. And he says, here's the thing. This is the heart of the matter, right? The heart of the matter is this. Most of us think that we need to win, but we're separating ourselves from God. Jesus tells a parable in Luke chapter 18 that really speaks to this. And he says this, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else. Jesus told a parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and he prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers and evildoers and adulterers, even like this tax collector over here. I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 of all that I have. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven. He beat his breast, and he said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus tells this story, and the funny thing about this story, when he tells this story, he's talking to the religious leaders who were this way, and nobody listening to this story says, no, that doesn't really happen. Right? He doesn't say that at all. In fact, for the people listening, they all know the truth. He asks the question right afterwards, which one of these two people had their prayers heard by God? And everybody knows it's the tax collector who is sitting there saying, God, I am a messed up person on my own. We all know deep down inside that we're not supposed to be this way, right? We can feel it. In fact, we see a little bit later on in Romans chapter 2, where Paul, talking to the church, says, this is the problem. This is the judgy church. I'm going to talk to you guys about this. He says this, you therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself because you pass judgment for the same things. Paul is talking in this passage, actually following up one of the more famous modern passages to the church in America. Romans chapter 1, the end of Romans chapter 1 is what's called the downward spiral of faith. And in this downward spiral of faith, we see when people give up following God and they start to exchange the truth of God for a lie, they start worshiping created things rather than the Creator. They start satisfying their own sexual desires. There's all kinds of, it talks about lasciviousness and homosexuality and terrible things where people are trying to get other people to sin too, and it's this stuff. And I've heard people in the church say, see, this is what's happening in the world, and it's absolutely true. But then Paul says right after that this is to the church. You therefore, you have no excuse because you pass judgment on someone else, but whatever point you're judging them, you're condemning yourself because you pass judgment are doing the same things. The truth of the matter is, there's a problem. We have a problem. And when Jesus says to the church, says in this Sermon on the Mount, he's talking to these people who want to follow him, and he says, look, at whatever measure you're judging other people, you're going to be judged as well. He's giving them a warning. So I want to ask you a question. Do we want God judging us with the same harshness that we judge other people? Do I want God to look at me in the same way that I look at other people? Scrutinizing everything, picking out every flaw, finding every reason why that person is messed up. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't think we do. I think for most of us, we would be ashamed if somebody just followed us around with a video camera for 24 hours. What are you doing right here? What about right here? Why aren't you up doing so? We would find a reason very quickly to be ashamed. Now, I'm not saying anything this morning that is blowing your mind. All of us know this. All of us know this deep down inside. We know we're not supposed to do these things. And in fact, this passage is a scary passage for us. But I told you earlier, I have a reason why we do this. So I want to ask you to keep going with me here. Let's dig in a little further. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3 and 4. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you say to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your brother's eye. We can't understand verse 1 and 2 without verse 3 and 4. I want you to hear what this says, because this is a very powerful thing. Jesus goes on from talking about judging not, don't judge, or you will be judged. He says, why do you look at this speck in your brother's eye without dealing with the log in your eye, the log that you're carrying around? First deal with that, and then you can deal with the speck in your brother's eye. So the speck is the judgment of what we do with other people. And he's picturing this thing. You can image this. You walk up to somebody, and this guy's like, I feel like I've got something going on here. And you're like, oh, you know what? I think you got a little bit of sawdust in your eye. You ever got something stuck in your eye? It stinks. You ever help somebody get something out of their eye? Right? It's kind of a crazy thing when you open it up and you actually see the thing on the eyeball. You can kind of like move it off. You can touch it with your fingertip and rub it on. I'm trying to make you uncomfortable here, right? Anyway, but imagine me saying, hey, I got it. While I've got this giant log just hanging out of my eye right here, right? And I'm smashing you on the side of the head as I'm trying to get this thing out. You would look at me and say, I need you to stop and back up. But he doesn't say that helping the person getting the speck out is wrong. I have a proposition for you. Sin is just something good that God has given us that has been corrupted to destroy us. When we lie, we all know that lying is sin. You know what the problem with lying is? God has given us a special ability as humanity to be able to communicate in powerful ways. And what Satan does is take that good gift, and our own flesh, man, we love this. He'll take this good gift that we have, and it'll twist it to use it for something bad, to use it for something selfish. So when I lie, I'm just trying to make myself look good, or I'm trying to make you look bad, or I'm trying to gain for myself. So it's taken this good gift of communication, and it's twisted it for something bad. Sin is always taking something that God has given us and then destroying it. So like sexual sin, we're talking about sexual sin, and all of the sexual sins, all of those things. Sex in itself is not bad. It's something that God has given us. It's a God thing. Like God has created us to enjoy this thing. And what Satan has done then is to say, you know what? So God has made this so that you can have this with you and your husband or with you and your wife, and it's a special thing that draws the bond together when it's right, and it holds things together when there's hard times, and you can be together. Sex is not the answer, but it's a good gift from God when it's in the right place. And what Satan does is takes this good gift and switches it and twists it so that you use it selfishly that destroy yourself. That's what we do. Judgment is a good gift from God that God gives us to be able to help other people. And what we do is take this good gift and use it selfishly to destroy other people. There's a reason why you notice broken things in other people. God has made you to notice when other people suffer so that you can help them through the suffering. God has made you and designed you to be able to notice when other people struggle so that you can go to that person and say, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. But what do we do with that gift? What sin does is it twists it. And we look at that person and say, instead of it doesn't have to be this way, you're a piece of junk. You don't deserve any more than this, and this is why I'm better than you. So what judgment is no different than sexual immorality. What judgment is no different than lying. What judgment is no different than any of these things, because all it's doing is taking something good that God has given us. And with a big giant plank in our eye, we're walking around judging other people. Taking something good that God has given us and twisted it for selfishness. But it doesn't have to be that way. What Jesus says right here, and I love this, is take out the plank. Look at your life. Look at your life. Not at that person's life, not at somebody else's life. Look at your life and say, before I look at this person and think that person's an idiot, before I go all New Mexican on this person, I need to look at myself and see where am I just jacked up? Where am I looking at this life and thinking, man, I got this down? Because the reality is, I'm not nailing it. The reality is, I'm not running around with the perfect life. That the Pharisee who looks and says, God, thank you that I am not like other men. I fast twice a week, and I pray all the time, and I am not like that adulterer, that tax collector who are all messed up. I am here today because I am praying, right? As long as you're in that place, you're never going to be able to be molded by God, because you've got this giant plank sitting out of your eye. But if you take the plank out, when you analyze where you're at and you say, God, without you, I don't have anything. I can't do this without you, God. But if I get out of the way, please, God, use me for something good. When you get out of the way, all of a sudden, God gives you the ability to be able to see somebody else's pain and brokenness and hard times and say, hey, I want to walk with you. I don't care what it's going to take. I'm going to be there with you. And that becomes something that's different. That's what the church is supposed to be. That's what the world is built to be like. But we can't help anyone else if we can't see our own problems. Now, before we go any further, I need to make this very clear, abundantly clear. We've all known people, the Bible calls them busybodies, who are constantly concerned about other people's problems, right? But they're concerned about other people's problems because they like the drama. They want to get in on the gossip, as I'm going to say here old man stuff, as the kids call it, the tea. I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But if you're in this place where you're constantly worried about other people's stuff because it's the same thing. That's the pride stuff. I'm not talking about being a busybody and just getting meddling in other people's stuff. But what Jesus is saying is that there will be times when you've dealt with your own heart where you can look at other people and see a broken thing and say, you know what? I want to walk alongside you. I want to be here with you. I want to walk alongside you. You don't have to go through this alone. And if you've ever had somebody do that with you, there are few things more refreshing in this world than God sending somebody to walk alongside you when you're struggling. And when it's right, it's different than anything this world can offer. With that in mind, Jesus says one more thing, and it's going to sound a little random at first, but it's connected, so I want you guys to see this. Don't waste what is holy. This is Matthew 7:6. Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample the pearls, then turn and attack you. So the New American Standard actually says in this, it says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Dogs? Pigs? What are we talking about here? What is going on? As Jesus just talked about a plank and not judging, then immediately he follows with this place of, don't throw your pearls to pigs. Don't give your good stuff to dogs. Pigs were unclean animals to Jewish people. Dogs were seen as the lowest of the low, like you would throw scraps to dogs. They were not man's best friend. We didn't treat them then like we do here now, where a dog's more like important than a person here, right? Like in that time, dogs were seen as low. And when Jesus is saying this, there's a reason why he's saying it. And it's not just random. There will come times when you see somebody having a struggle and you go to that person and you say, hey, Mike, I see you're having a hard time with this. And the person responds with, I don't want to hear your stuff. Go away. If you continue in that path, and you continue down that path where you force it, you can end up driving somebody away from God in trying to help that person. Right? There comes a point in time when we, and look, we know this to be true, when we know what needs to be there, but it doesn't seem to help. Some of us have family members who we know, if they would just come to understand the love of Jesus in their lives would change. And we try, and we try, and we start to feel like we're driving those people away. Right? This is a struggle. This is a major struggle for many of us. And so we have to ask ourselves, what do we do with that? How do we deal with that type of a thing? Am I being worse by trying? Am I being worse by not trying? When you look at the context of Scripture, what Jesus tells us right there is there comes a point when, for people, we let God do the work, and we let God work on those people when we continue to pray. We don't walk away from the person and say, you know what, I'm done with you forever, just get out. But we build stuff so that they can get to know the truth of what God has for them. We see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Actually, a really good illustration of this type of thing. In 1 Corinthians 5, there was actually a guy talking about this. There was a guy in the church who was sleeping with his stepmom, right? And everybody in the church knew about it. And he said, well, the grace of Jesus covers all kinds of sin. And because of the grace of Jesus, I can do this. And it's not a big deal. It's kind of a problem. And so Paul says to the church, look, the reality of the matter is you got to deal with people's stuff. And there's going to be a time when we got to deal with it. In 1 Corinthians 5, verse 12, it isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders. It's not my responsibility to judge people outside of the faith. Right? They don't know any different. They haven't been enlightened by God. They're going to do what they're going to do. But it is certainly your responsibility to judge those inside of the church who are sinning. God will judge those who are on the outside. But as the scriptures say, you must remove the evil person from you. So Paul says to the church, like, the people who don't know Jesus are going to make terrible decisions. They're dead in their sins. They're going to sin. We should not be surprised when people who don't know the Word of God, who do not know the love of Jesus in their hearts. Look, I'm not judging those people as like terrible people. They're broken, dead people without the Word of God. You were too. All of us outside of the working of the Holy Spirit in our lives are pieces of stuff. And Jesus brings us to life. But Paul says to the church, he says the church's job right? The church's job is to look at others in the church, to look at each other, and say, hey man, I see that you're doing this. There's a better way. So that gift of judgment that we have inside us is built towards people in the church to try to grow each other up, to try to grow each other forward, to try to be different and to move things forward towards God. If we don't do that, we end up failing. The problem comes in the fact that most of the time we judge the people outside but not the ones inside. If you have a family member who doesn't know, don't give up on that person. Paul says, God will judge those on the outside. Let God work with that person. Keep talking to that person in the way that you can, but show that person something different in your life. But it is definitely our responsibility when we see somebody who knows the Word of God, who knows the love of Jesus in their hearts, and we see that person in sin, it is our responsibility to reach out to that person and say, hey man, what are you doing? If you were to walk into a restaurant, and my wife is right over here, so if you were to walk into a restaurant and see some woman who doesn't look like this beautiful woman over here, and we're sitting there laughing and holding hands, it would be your responsibility to come up to me and say, Jim, what are you doing, man? Like right then. Right then. If I am a follower of Jesus, I'm going to be able to say, hey, no, actually, this is my grandma. No, just kidding. If you come up to me, that's the responsibility as the church. It's our responsibility, and this is the key point to what Jesus is trying to say in Matthew 7, what Jesus is saying in Matthew 7, verse 1 through 6. Jesus' intent for our discernment is community. That's our bottom line. The reason why we're able to discern brokenness in other people is to help build the community of faith, right? We're able to see the problems in other people because we are there to build the faith. And the reality is part of the reason why the church, I believe, is where it is today in America. We lament the way that people who don't know Jesus attack the church, and we lament the way that the government, we feel like, is coming against the church, and we complain about all of these things. Well, look, they're going to do what they're going to do. They don't know any better. The work is done here. And the problem that we have as a church oftentimes is we trade false unity for community. False unity is this. It's me seeing somebody else's broken place and then saying, I can't do anything about that because I got this giant plank in my own eye, so I shouldn't say anything to that person about that. What would be my responsibility? To stop making excuses for the plank. Deal with my plank. And then help other people grow as well. Just saying, that person has his problem, I have my problem, is the problem with us as the church. As the church, we build each other up. We hold each other accountable. The first time I really experienced this, I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school. I went up and I was playing basketball at a little park in Albuquerque, and I was playing, and I had a temper. My kids don't, but I had a temper when I was playing basketball. And one day I went up and I missed a layup. And as soon as I missed a layup, I was wearing this Christian t-shirt, nice little godly t-shirt that I had got at a conference I went to, and I missed a layup. And I did the Christmas story thing, oh, fudge. Only I didn't say fudge. Yelled it out really loud. And this guy ran up to me, tapped me on the chest, and he said, hey, man, nice shirt. You want to live it? And he went down to the other end. There are times, if we're being honest, when we need somebody to tell us, hey, man, nice shirt. You want to live it? And there are times when you're not being a jerk. Men, I'm not trying to be hard on you, but I'm being real. Like, if he had talked up to me and said, hey man, brother, I need to talk to you. There's a better way that, like, as a guy, I wasn't going to answer the better way. I needed somebody to tell me, knock it off. Do you ever need somebody to just tell you, you need to stop? Just stop. There's a better way, man. Let's go. And for the church, I don't think that we need to sit there super judgmental of each other. That's not what we're called to be. We're not called to be arrogant. We're not called to be jerks. We're not called to be boastful. We are called to be community. And we're not going to be able to be community until we have somebody tell us. I had the same thing happen. I am here today because I was in a car with a guy. I went down to Mexico to build a house, and I was going to New Mexico State the next fall. I was not going to go to Bible college and talk about ministry and learn about ministry. I was going to go to New Mexico State. And I was telling this guy, I was like, hey man, I'm just going to go. I can tell more people about Jesus in a classroom than I can on a stage or working with kids. And he looked at me and said, man, you're an idiot. He said, God has given you a gift, and you can spend 24 hours a day telling people about this gift in that situation with the gifts that you have, or you can be in a classroom, which yes, you are getting to teach people and you get to show people, but you don't have the opportunity to get to talk about it all the time. And with your gift, you need to do this. And I heard him and I said, whatever, I'm going the other way. But it stuck in my head. And when my life hit rock bottom, I heard his voice and I went the other direction. There are people that need to tell us something different, and maybe you're one of those people sometimes. So how do we do that? How do we get to the place where we deal with our own plank? How do we get to the place where we can discern other people's and help them? I've got 3 things. I want something that you can do with your head, something tangible you can be thinking about. We have journals outside. Please grab one of those journals if you haven't yet. Write these things down. I want you to journal the things that you hold over others. What do you boast about? What do you find yourself bragging to yourself about compared to other people? What are those things? Journal those things out. Bathe those things in prayer. Pray about those things and say, God, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to look on other people and see this is why I'm better than them. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of fighting with that person because I don't understand why that person's doing these things, and so I'm just going to judge him or her. I'm tired of being the judge. Journal those things out. Open it up. And then I want to ask you to do something specifically in your prayer life. It's going to be a hard prayer. But pray for someone that you specifically judge. Everybody close your eyes. Picture the person that drives you crazy. You see him? You see her? That person, you can find every single flaw. You can see him right now. That person's voice is driving you nuts. That person's excuses are driving you nuts. You know what I'm talking about. Pray. Specifically for that person. Pray for that person's life to be changed by the Word of God. Stop seeing that person in judgment. Pray. Keep doing it. Keep praying. And then I want to ask you to do something, because I want you to keep praying this week for that person. Something tangible. I want you to drag the plank out of your own eye. With your hands, drag the plank out of your eye. Deal with your plank, because the odds are you're a hypocrite, right? You talk like you got all the answers, but you know you don't. And you know the thing that is holding you back from really being the man or the woman God has you to be, it's usually 1 or 2 things. Most of us aren't dealing with 100 different sins, huge sins. We have 1 or 2 that are more than enough for us. Drag them out into the open, write them down in your journal, and then find somebody that you trust. Go to that person and say, hey, I'm dealing with this sin. I got a problem. I got a problem, and I want you to walk with me through this. In doing that, you're opening yourself up for God to do something different in your life. Let's be people who build the community with the gift that God has given us.